This is Jessie, and you're listening to the Curious Cabinet Podcast. Hey guys, so today I have a podcast for you about Evelyn Hartley. Since Netflix's Monster came out, the Ed Gein story, I started doing more research into this case because I know that this was some of the stuff that they had in the show wasn't true about Evelyn Hartley. And I didn't know exactly what was true and what wasn't. So I did do a little video about this, like a short video that I posted to TikTok and Instagram and Facebook because I just post everything on everything. But I wanted to do a deep dive into this case because it is a pretty crazy one. So here we go. Evelyn Grace Hartley was born to Richard and Ethel Hartley on November 21st, 1937. She was the youngest of 4 children and was the only girl. She had 2 older brothers and 1 younger. In 1946, one of her older brothers passed away from polio. And in 1949, the family moved from Charleston, Illinois to La Crosse, Wisconsin. Evelyn was 15 and a junior in Central High School. She was very quiet, but known to be super dependable. She was a teacher's favorite student. Straight A's, she had a love for science in particular, and stayed involved in extracurricular activities like drama club. She had a few dates with boys in her grade, but never had a steady boyfriend. Her family attended the First Presbyterian Church, where she was an officer of the Presbyterian Youth Program and the Westminster Fellowship. Outside of doing all that she already was doing, she enjoyed playing tennis, hiking, swimming, golfing, and swimming. I don't know why I have swimming twice in my notes. So she was all around like a good girl, was smart, focused on her studies, didn't get too involved with boys, and was just a really good person. And I do want to just point out here that in Monster, the Ed Gein story on Netflix, they do say that Evelyn had polio herself, which isn't supported by any facts. I think the writers took that fact that polio was rampant at the time and that her brother had passed away from it and kind of use it to add some dramatization. But she was said to have been a healthy girl, and she never needed that knee brace that they said she used in there either. That was just an addition to the show. So on the night of October 24th, Evelyn was babysitting 20-month-old Janice Rasmussen at the Rasmussen's family home on the 2400 block of Hochschuler Drive. I don't know if I pronounced that correctly, so I apologize if I didn't. Viggo Rasmussen worked at Crosse State College as a professor of biology and was a colleague of her father's. Viggo, his wife Madeline, and their oldest daughter Rosalind had gone to the Crosse State College homecoming football game that evening. Their usual babysitter was also going to the game, so they asked if Evelyn was available to babysit that night. At first, she had agreed to take the job, but later she kind of wanted to back out for some reason. Her mother made her go and babysit because she had already committed to doing it. I'd feel so awful if I was a parent, and this happened. It's so tragic. And I made my kid babysit that night. Oh, it's so sad. But the neighborhood that they lived in was newer and on the edge of La Crosse. The neighborhood was so new, in fact, that there was very, very little external lighting on the street since it hadn't been installed yet. Around 6:30, Viggo picked Evelyn up from her house and brought her back to their home. Evelyn had brought a couple of school books with her since she planned on studying after the baby went to sleep. Evelyn's father, Richard, wanted her to keep in touch while she was babysitting as well. So he reminded her before she left to call home at 8:30 just to make sure everything was fine. When she never called, her father repeatedly tried to call and get in touch with her. After multiple failed attempts, he decided to go to the house and check up on her. And when he got there, he knocked on the door and he rang the doorbell a couple of times, but there was no answer. He noticed that the door was locked, but the lights in the radio were on inside. And then he noticed her glasses and one of her shoes on the floor. When he walked around the house, he saw a basement window facing a vacant lot that was open. The screen was removed and left up against the house. A small stepladder was underneath the window, almost like someone either had climbed in or out using the stepladder. Later, they found out that the family had been using the stepladder to paint the basement. Richard climbed in through that window, since he couldn't get in any other way, and found her other shoe in the basement. He checked out each room carefully and found no sign of Evelyn. He found baby Janice asleep in her crib, completely unharmed. Nothing was wrong with the baby. But after walking through the house again, he realized the living room furniture looked out of place, almost like it had been kind of thrown around or pushed around. Her school books were also thrown around, and her glasses were broken. Other than that, and the mess in the living room, everything was in order and nothing had been stolen. But he also found blood smeared on the exterior and the interior of the home, which obviously made him worry immensely. A neighbor had seen Richard walking around the home and came over to see what was going on. The neighbor helped to look for Evelyn around the house with all the things that they had noticed, they ended up calling the police. When the Rasmussen family came home, there were police surrounding it. And I couldn't imagine coming home and just seeing police everywhere around my house when someone was babysitting my baby. Oh gosh, it's just a scary feeling. During the initial investigation, they found a ton of evidence at the scene. They found 3 windows that had pry marks on them, signaling that someone had tried to get in multiple times in multiple spots before eventually going through the basement. There was a trail of blood along with some pools of blood, 2 specifically in the yard, and 1 being 18 inches in diameter. There were also some inside the house and near the basement window. With the pattern of blood pools at the scene with the trailing of blood, it seemed as if someone was carrying her through the yard and had to stop multiple times to take a break. There were also very clear footprints in the basement window box and in the living room with a very distinct pattern on the sole. This piece of evidence did become crucial. According to detectives, there were some red threads found in the window well from the basement. Evelyn's dad recalled that she had been wearing red pants that day. The evidence wasn't collected, though, and eventually blew away in the wind. And even though the front door was locked, they believed that the suspects left through it since it had a self-locking mechanism. Police brought in tracking dogs. They ended up tracking her scent for about 2 blocks and then lost track of her at Cooley Drive, just northwest of the Rasmussen home. They believe that this is where the suspects parked their car before they drove off with her. This theory was pretty much confirmed since there were multiple neighbors who told police that they had seen a strange car that night around 8 p.m. It was a light-colored vehicle circling around the area as if they were waiting for someone. Another witness also came forward and said that around 7 p.m., they had heard screams, but just assumed that it was some kids playing since it wasn't uncommon to hear kids playing like that. This information kind of helped investigators create more of a timeline and figure out how things really transpired that night, and that somewhere within that hour, Evelyn had been taken from the home. So I wonder if maybe the abductors came to the house, hurt Evelyn, and she tried to escape through the basement. Maybe the trail of blood wasn't from her being carried, but maybe it was from her trying to leave, and she had to stop to take breaks because obviously she was bleeding pretty badly. Maybe the fibers were from her snagging her jeans on the window sill and climbing out, and that's why there was a pool of blood right there and in the yard. Then maybe the suspects left out the front door, hopped in their car, and found her and put her in their car while she was trying to run away and get help. Because I keep wondering, like, how did no one see her being either dragged away or carried away? It's just kind of strange. But okay, back to the information. On October 26, 2 days later, a man named Ed Hoffer came forward with some information. He said that night that Evelyn disappeared, he was driving around and it was about 7:15 p.m. And he almost got hit by a two-toned Buick, either year 1941 or 1942. He said inside the car he saw 3 people, 2 guys and a girl. There was one guy driving and the other guy was in the back seat with the girl, but she seemed to be like slumped against the seat in front of her with her head pressing into the back of it. He recalled a couple minutes earlier seeing a couple of teens staggering around where some of the blood had been found. He assumed that the 3 were heading to the college homecoming game and didn't really think anything of it until he found out that Evelyn was missing. A few days after Evelyn disappeared, investigators found underwear and a bra covered in blood outside of the city, near an underpass 2 miles south of La Crosse. The blood on the underwear was Evelyn's blood type and was confirmed to be menstrual blood. They couldn't prove that these belonged to Evelyn, but it's assumed that they did. There was a pair of men's pants that were found on the same road about 4 miles away, but also, it's unknown if these had anything to do with this case. They found a pair of size 11 Goodrich machinist boots stained with blood that were recently dumped in the Coon Valley area, which is just southeast of La Crosse. And I'm not exactly sure how they confirmed that these were recently dumped. Maybe like a trash cleanup was held in that area in the days prior. I'm not exactly sure. But the sole of the shoe matched the footprints that were found at the crime scene. The blood was also a match for Evelyn's type. And this was like a huge lead for the case. The shoes had a suction cup pattern that was matched to the footprints found in the Rasmussen home. The police contacted the shoe company, and they found out that this particular shoe was called the Hood Mogul. It was sold in Wisconsin, Iowa, Michigan, Minnesota, and Illinois. While they were inspecting the shoes, they came up with a theory that the worker worked on machinery because of the kind of shoe it was, and drove a Whizzer motorbike because of where the shoes were worn on the bottom. That's the kind of motorbike that would do that kind of wear to it. Inside of the shoe was a hair that seemed to have belonged to someone who was African American. I don't know if that was ever confirmed or not, if they ever tested the DNA on it or anything. But they also noted that 2 people had worn the shoes, but the second wearer's feet were too big for them. I guess they looked at like the prints on the inside soles and it looked like 2 different prints in there. So maybe they were like secondhand used shoes. Who knows? But anyway, So there was also a size 36 blue denim jacket that was well worn and had recently been dumped there in the same area. Investigators had heard rumors that a local farmer had picked it up along the highway and threw it into the back of his truck. There were bloodstains on the front, back, and sleeves, and the blood type matched Evelyn's. Back at the Rasmussen home, the blood on the walls that was also smeared had been smeared with a denim material. I guess they found fibers that were in the smearing of the blood. The jacket had been cut off at the bottom and rehemmed badly with white thread. They found base metal paint flecks on it. Base metal paint flecks on it. One of the 4 buttons were missing, and there were blast fibers were found in the left pocket, which is the kind you would find on scrubbing brushes. From the armpit down to the bottom was very warm, and it was very similar to the wear that would happen if you worked as a steeplejack. And honestly, I did not know what a steeplejack was, so I had to look it up. So if you don't know what a steeplejack is, it's like a tradesman who works to repair things that are great heights, like church steeples or chimneys, towers, or high rises. Police looked into some of the people who belonged to this trade, but it led nowhere. They do believe the jacket was worn by the kidnapper, but wasn't worn by the same person wearing the size 11 shoes because it was so small, which means that there were 2 different people involved in the abduction. The police actually brought the shoes to 31 different communities to try and gain some leads. Over 10,000 people saw the shoes, but nothing substantial came from it. The investigation launched over 2,000 people for a search. There were police officers, Boy Scouts, National Guardsmen, and just normal volunteer citizens. They searched by foot, boats, helicopters, aircrafts. There were multiple searches, and so many people helped look for Evelyn, but she was just nowhere to be found. Squirrel and deer hunters were told to stay alert for anything they may see out of the ordinary, and local farmers were told to check their properties. It was one of the largest missing persons searches in Wisconsin history. They also had a mass search of vehicles in the area, primarily focusing on the trunks of cars and back seats. Local law enforcement had gas station attendants help them check cars as well. They were told to report any car that refused to check, and cars that were clean got a sticker that said, "My car is okay." Some graves were even reopened because there were rumors that the suspects had buried her in a grave in order just to hide the body. Richard had led frantic searches in hopes to find something, anything that would lead him to Evelyn. He had sadly assumed from the beginning that he would be looking for a body. He spent time organizing volunteer search parties and driving aimlessly through the night. The lack of answers led to profound despair. At one point, a fisherman at a local lake called Clam Lake had found a bobby pin with some hair strands on it connected to his fishing line when he reeled it in. He threw it back, but remembered the case and told police about it. They searched the lake, but they never found the bobby pin or anything else that may have helped the case. About 6 months after Evelyn disappeared, in May of 1954, over 2,000 lie detector tests were set to be administered to the students at Central High School. Police were hoping to generate more leads than the school had initially agreed, but some of the parents were not happy about this. So really, they polygraphed about 300 students and got no information because everyone had passed. They also polygraphed Evelyn's dad and Viggo Rasmussen, and they both passed as well. The Hartleys were heartbroken, naturally, and began to use the media to beg for anyone with any answers about what could have happened or where she may be. Because this was so publicized, they also became the victim of an attempted extortion. A 20-year-old boy, as well as a 13-year-old boy he had convinced to join him, tried to scheme for $500 in exchange for information that they didn't have. The Hartleys notified police and both were arrested. In the first year of this case, over 3,500 people were interviewed, and over the years, dozens falsely confessed. Many more suspects have been questioned, but there was never enough evidence that supported any connection to this crime. So some of the theories for this case. If you watch Netflix's Monster, the Ed Gein story, you know that one theory is that Ed Gein killed her, but there is no proof. When he was arrested for his other murders, he was questioned about Evelyn as well. He had coincidentally been visiting a relative who lived a few blocks away from the Rasmussen home at the time. The show exaggerates this because there's really no evidence linking the two besides the fact that he was in the area at the same time that she disappeared. Gein also denied any involvement and even passed 2 lie detector tests. There was also no evidence, like I said, linking to him to her disappearance, but we also know that Ed Gein liked to keep souvenirs from his murders and his crimes. So personally, I don't think he was involved in this because they didn't find anything at the home that belonged to Evelyn. But some people still do believe that he was involved. Another theory is that Evelyn wasn't the person that they were coming to abduct that night. She was filling in for another babysitter, so if it was a planned abduction, they just came and it happened that Evelyn was there, and it was just wrong place at the wrong time. A third theory is that some have speculated that the original motive was robbery. Everyone in the area was aware that it was the homecoming game that night, and that no one would be at their homes. The abductors staked out the home, but when they discovered Evelyn there, their plans had to change. There was an attempted forced entry on another neighbor's house that night as well. The only problem with this theory is that nothing was missing from the home, but that might also be because the plans had to change when they tried to get out of the home before getting caught. A fourth theory is that maybe a drifter came through that night, maybe on drugs, and just attacked Evelyn. Someone that no one knew and went completely undetected. It would be hard to track someone down who really had no attachment to the town and didn't know anyone in the area. And the fifth theory is a pretty wild one, but from my personal opinion, I think it is the most promising because of the facts. In 2004, a man named Mel Williams came to police with a conversation he had accidentally recorded at a bar back in 1969. He was trying to record a local band at the bar, but he ended up overhearing a man named Clyde, also known as Twee Peterson, and he claimed that he and a man named Jack Golfair, I believe is how you pronounce it, and a third unknown person had murdered Evelyn and buried her in Lafarge, Wisconsin. The tape ended because Peterson told Williams to stop recording, and Williams doesn't remember anything that was said after he had turned the tape off. The information on the tape aligned with the details of the murder. It talked about her shoes and the broken glasses, and about the jacket that was found on the side of the road. These two men were locals. Jack and Clyde were locals to La Crosse in the 20s and 30s and had histories of petty crimes. But both of these men died in 2008 without any confessions. Police had promised to investigate, and I'm not sure if the men had ever been questioned about it before their deaths. But in 2008, police proposed to use ground-penetrating radar and to dig in certain parts of Lafarge. But this hasn't been executed because there's some issues with cost and landowner issues. So I guess the owners are... I think if they search on private property, that the people who own the property have to pay for them to do it. And why would they pay for them to do it? Especially if you don't have the money. That's, they're not going to pay out of pocket. But anyway, Janice was so young at the time that she doesn't really remember what happened. But her older sister, Rosalind, was 7 and has since spoken to the media while growing up. She said that her family never really talked about what happened much because of how truly terrifying it was. Her family put up the house for sale and moved almost immediately after this happened. Her parents were haunted by what happened that night. She said it was the first time she had ever seen her father cry. And growing up, her father installed metal bars on the basement windows, and she and her sister were not allowed to babysit. Evelyn's parents moved to Portland, Oregon in the 1970s. Grief-stricken, they tried to escape any reminders of the horrors that came from La Crosse. They eventually came to terms with the fact that they would probably never find out what happened to their daughter. They tried to avoid any publicity and rebuild their life, and Richard still worked as an academic, but Evelyn's disappearance just broke them. Her 2 remaining siblings remained low profile, and one even moved to Australia. Evelyn's parents have since passed away. I'm not sure if her siblings are still living or not. This case remains one of Wisconsin's most famous unsolved mysteries. With the following days of her disappearance, a reward fund was created, totaling up to $6,600, which is nearly $80,000 today. And the evidence to this case still does remain in storage. Evelyn's shoes and her jacket have been misplaced, but her dental records remain on file. Even though a body has never been found, it is considered a homicide. And that is the disappearance of Evelyn Hartley. And I wonder if they've done any more recent investigations or even retested that piece of hair that they found in the shoe. There's so much more that they can do with DNA testing now. I hope that one day they find answers about what really happened to her. But thanks for listening to today's episode, guys. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and find me on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. Until next week.